It was a quiet day at Bigsby Land amusement park. The overcast sky, threatening rain, had kept most visitors away. An occasional rumble of thunder could sometimes be heard far off in the distance. The air had a damp chill to it that made me wish I'd brought a jacket. Teddy and I had the summer off school, and because of the weather, we had the park almost to ourselves, as we ambled along the cobblestone pathways. Teddy and I went with his dad every summer to Bigsby Land, as his treat. It was something I always looked forward to. At least it was, until this happened. Hey, check it out, Jason. The log ride. Let's do that first. There's no lineup. We can go 10 times if we want to. Teddy pointed at the towering fake mountain which we were getting close to now. It was the big trademark feature of the park. A large foam fiberglass mountain with a snow-capped peak, which sat in the very center of Bigsby Land. It could be seen from the highway for miles in every direction. Okay, you boys have fun. I'll be at the end waiting for you, Teddy's dad said, leaving us at the entrance to the log ride. The two of us went inside through the tunnel, which was made to look like an old mine. Faux weathered beams lined the tunnel. Pickaxes and shovels were arranged around fake piles of dirt made from fiberglass, all to give the impression of this being a real, working coal mine. It was quiet inside the dark corridor which led steeply upwards through the guts of the mountain, leading up to the ride. We had a lot of stairs to climb, but it would be worth it. The two of us trudged our way up the steps as we talked. Did you hear they changed this ride from the original? Teddy asked. Apparently the old ride used to be a lot scarier. Who told you that? I asked with a hint of suspicion. Teddy was always making up stories. I read about it online. There's a bunch of conspiracy sites talking about it. This didn't surprise me. Teddy was deep into conspiracies. Okay, so what's the big secret with the old ride? Evil Oompa Loompas? He looked at his feet and didn't say anything for a few moments as we continued up the stairs. It looked like he was thinking about whether he wanted to tell me or not. Never mind, it's dumb. Most people would push the subject out of curiosity, but I'd heard Teddy ramble on enough about conspiracies for one lifetime, so I left it alone. It probably was dumb. We kept going up the stairs until we finally reached the top, where we would board the log ride. After going through the turnstiles, an employee wearing a Bigsby Land uniform stopped us. Yo, you gotta be taller than the Impus to ride, little dudes, said the red-eyed teen who smelled of French cigarettes, holding up his hand to stop us. We each stood with our backs against the cardboard cutout of the Impus, a green-skinned, pointy-eared gremlin who was the official mascot of the park. After careful consideration, the guy agreed we were both a couple inches taller than the Impus, meeting the minimum height requirement. We'd only gotten big enough to ride the attraction 1 year prior, and it was still an exciting experience. The drop-off at the end was huge and absolutely terrifying. All right, go ahead, he said, waving us through. Steer clear of the Impus, little dudes. Jittery with nervous anticipation, the two of us climbed onto the log ride. The whole place was empty, aside from the two of us, so we went straight to the first row and pulled down the safety bar until it hit our knees. We had the ride all to ourselves. Keep your hands and legs inside the vehicle at all times, and no flash photography. Avoid the side tunnels. Have a big terrific day, a man's recorded voice said through the PA system. It was rapid, garbled, and barely comprehensible. What was that about side tunnels? I asked. Teddy gulped, ignoring my question. A second later, the log began to move forward in the water, and the two of us waited nervously for it to pick up speed. On both sides of us, cartoon farm scenes with gophers, cows, and grizzly bear farmers played out. The animatronics cheaply made, and the cutscenes jumpy with poorly written dialogue. Even as kids, we weren't impressed. But that wasn't what we were here for. We were interested in the big drop at the end. This was all just added suspense. Gary the Gopher! You rascal! I'll get you! One of the animatronic bears in farmer's overalls was yelling, waving his pitchfork at the gopher with a carrot in its mouth, who bounded away atop a pistoning steel tube. Hello, kind travelers, the gopher called out. Won't you help me, please? Gus the grizzly bear is gonna get me. Teddy and I just laughed. Screw you, Gary. Get bent. Teddy yelled, throwing a balled-up park map at the animatronic gopher and hitting it square in the face. Instead of the animation continuing as it normally did, the gopher stopped dead in its tracks, looking offended. It just glared at us as it disappeared into the distance behind us. The rest of the animatronics from that point on stayed silent, dark, and still. Whoa, that's weird. Didn't do this last year. Is there a glitch or something? I don't know, Teddy said. Hey, what's that? We looked up ahead and saw there was something in the water blocking the flow. It was an overturned passenger cart, a log just like the one we were in, but it was riddled with holes and appeared cracked and ancient. What the hell? Oh man, we're gonna crash into that thing! Then I noticed there was another, smaller tunnel leading off to the side. It looked like we were going to crash into the log blocking the river, and then would be forced into this other, dilapidated-looking side tunnel. Oh no, Teddy said, looking terrified. That's the old section of the ride. The part I was telling you about. The website said you should never go down that tunnel. It was closed off for a good reason. I looked and saw there were boards marked Keep Out and Danger, which were hanging across the upper part of the tunnel opening. But we would slip beneath them easily, and there was no way to stop us from being sucked into that abandoned side tunnel. The current was too strong and the boat was too heavy. If we put our hands out to try to push off from the sides, we were liable to badly injure ourselves. We crashed with a brutal impact into the other log, and the safety bar banged into my gut hard, knocking the wind out of me. Then we drifted sideways at the fork, slowly floating into the darkened side tunnel. The walls and ceiling above showed cracks and holes, years of unrepaired damage. Sounds could be heard echoing from the darkness ahead, like movement and alien voices speaking to one another. The two of us called out for help, screaming for someone to stop the ride, but we were too far down the side tunnel, and the sound of rushing water was drowning out our voices. A moment later, we were enveloped by complete darkness, as the log began to pick up speed once again, the current taking it down this new, unintended route. This is the side tunnel they warned people not to go into. They could never demolish this part of the ride, Teddy was saying, reciting his conspiracy theories. Most parks would just build over an old section, right? Tear down the new, make way for the old? Not here. At Bigsby Land, things work a little differently. Stop, Teddy. Please stop. I'm freaked out enough as it is. We were picking up speed, flowing faster and faster through the darkness, the tunnel twisting and turning. It felt far more precarious and terrifying than the ride we were used to, the logboat feeling like it could capsize at any second as it went around sharp bends. I was starting to feel queasy and motion sick, hanging on for my life as the ride picked up speed and we plunged downwards into the dark abyss inside the mountain. There was movement in the darkness, I realized, as my eyes adjusted to the low light. Things were scampering in the shadows off to the sides of the ride, just out of reach, moving quickly, almost keeping pace with the rapid motion of the log we were in as it traveled down the river. My best friend kept speaking, but his familiar voice had changed now. He had begun to sound completely different, as if what he was saying was coming through an old PA speaker mounted to his face. It was garbled and distorted, his cadence and everything about his voice sounding different, like an automated tour guide on a theme park ride. He sounded like an old man with a whiskey voice speaking on the radio. Or, I realized, like the old recordings of Mitchell Bigsby I'd heard. The founder of Bigsby Land. Oh, they tried to tear it down bit by bit. However, the workers kept disappearing. The ones who emerged from the tunnel were missing pieces of their arms and legs, bite marks visible from tiny mouths. They would tell the others to stay out, that there were creatures inside the tunnel who fed on human flesh. Small, green-skinned monsters who the Bigsby family had kept secret. They were the ones who built this park for Mitchell Bigsby nearly 100 years prior, constructing this mountain like a modern Great Pyramid. All of Bigsby Land is built on their blood, sweat, and tears, not to mention the bodies of their many dead. Teddy, can you hear me? I asked him in the darkness, terrified to see what was happening to my friend. Was he possessed? Why are you talking like that? What's wrong with you? He didn't respond. His dark silhouette just stared at me blankly as the log picked up speed and traveled faster and faster down the tunnel. I could see the outlines of dozens of the creatures staring at us from the shoreline, watching us. I felt the log begin to shift and rock in the water, and I looked back to see the things were in the boat with us. They were climbing over the seats from row to row, moving toward us in the darkness. "The only way to appease these creatures born of darkness is to allow them a taste of your flesh," Teddy said in his new voice. "Just think of them like mosquitoes. They just need a taste of your blood, a little piece of your flesh, and then they'll let us go on our way. But there's no sense resisting them, since there are far too many. Impus and his minions have come for their pound of flesh, and we must oblige." Suddenly, the safety bar holding us in place released from its position, and Teddy stood up from his seat, his arms out to his sides, palms facing upwards, like he was sacrificing himself to them. Terrified, I watched as the creatures leapt from the back of the log ride behind us, landing on top of him. They looked ravenous as their mouths opened, revealing hundreds of small, sharp teeth. They feasted on his flesh in rapid, greedy bites until he stumbled backwards into the water. When that happened, it seemed to knock him out of whatever trance he'd been under. I looked back to see him thrashing and screaming as the gremlin creatures fought over him like piranhas in the bubbling water. "Teddy!" I screamed as he disappeared into the distance behind the boat. Then there were more of them leaping off the ledges beside the river, jumping onto the log and climbing over the seats towards me. I counted at least 3 of them. My heart was pounding, terrified after what had just happened to Teddy. I knew I'd have to fight for my life against these monsters. One leapt at me and latched onto me with sticky fingers like a toxic rainforest frog. I pried it off me with great effort and tossed the creature off the side of the boat into the water. Then another came at me and another. This time I couldn't pull them off me in time. As I tossed one over my shoulder, heaving into the water, the other one latched onto my bare leg and took a bite below my shorts. It hung onto me like a cartoon dog biting a mailman as I shook my leg, trying to wildly kick it off. I screamed and it eventually broke free. Flopping on the floor of the boat for a moment, it quickly recovered and jumped at me again. I managed to catch it, holding it out in front of me as it gnashed its pointed, needle-sharp teeth at me. It flailed and squirmed like a large, wriggling fish in my hands, slimy and wet as I tossed it over the side into the water. How many of these things were there, I wondered, as I watched more of them racing along beside the boat. I was ready to fight more of them off when they stopped, freezing in place. The log crashed against a wall in the adjoining tunnel, almost sending me from my feet, and I realized I was back in the new section of the log ride again. The old side tunnel met up with the new one just as insidiously as it had diverged from it in the first place. A light appeared up ahead, first the size of a quarter, but growing rapidly larger. It was the drop-off, I realized. Which would have been fine, no big deal compared to the terrors I just experienced. Except that the safety bar was still disengaged. There was nothing stopping me from flying out of my seat when the log dropped off the cliff, which was coming up ahead. Before I had too much time to think about it, the bottom dropped out from beneath me and I held onto the safety bar for dear life as it plunged off the precipice, jetting down the chute. My entire body lifted up from the seat and my sweating hands just barely kept a grip on the safety bar as I gripped it for dear life. Finally, the log crashed safely down into the waters below. Teddy's dad was off to the side, watching with widening eyes as he saw me alone in the log ride. The stunned, terrified expression on my face and the screams pouring out of me told him everything he needed to know. Blood was on my hands and face as I waved my arms over my head, hollering for somebody to help me. By the time I got off the ride and told the park attendants what had happened, Teddy's father was gone. He ran inside himself to try to save his son, leaving me alone with the staff members to explain what had just happened. Of course, none of them believed what I told them, instead just rewriting history as I spoke it. Evil gremlins attacked us and dragged Teddy into the water, turned into, "Teddy fell off the side of the boat and I hurt my leg trying to rescue him." His dad eventually accepted that as the truth, despite the flaws in that theory. I can't blame him. I wouldn't have believed me either. But I know what happened, and I know something is badly, badly wrong with Bigsby Land. How many more kids need to go missing before they'll admit what's happening? The Impus is real, and he's amassing an army inside the mountain at the center of Bigsby Land. A force that gets bigger by the day. and which feeds on human flesh. So stay out of the side tunnels, and have a Bigsby-rific day. This story was written by me, and a variation of it previously appeared on the Dr. Nosleep podcast. If you want to hear more stories written by me and other great authors, check out his podcast and YouTube channel, where he also shares high-quality horror animations and audio works. Links can be found in the description. Today's video was supported by patrons like Mark from Earth, Crimson Muse, Joy Burton, Diane Showers, Mark Sewall, Cheryl James, Pick Your Sticker, Teddy Dog, Clue 404, Mamakato, Dante Kincaid, Zarin Ray, Angela Donovan, Blarian 50, Devin Kyle, Timothy Baird, Ajeti, Bert Turner, Bajani Espinal, Michael Pierce, Big Joe, Carrie Harkonnen, LaDonna Spivey, Scott Tanaka. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jordan Grupe Horror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward. And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in the next Hollow's End story. Links to join are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. See you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.